All right. We'll go ahead and get started. So we will set our motivation. And we've done that. I think I've led that a number of times, so we can just sort of do that on our own in whatever way we can most effectively connect with those minds of refuge and bodhicitta. All right. So we finished up last week, our last class, the, sorry, I turned my phone on in my pocket. Okay. Sorry about that. I did that one time going up to my teacher to make a kata offering. That was not a good day. I started playing like a YouTube video in my pocket. It was not fun. So last Monday we finished the section on the freedoms that related to other realms. So we looked at all of the other realms in which our mind could be having an experience presently, but is not, and how that is advantageous because of either in the lower realms, the oppressive conditions are such that practice is not possible, developing the mind, tapping into the potential of the mind is not possible, or alternatively, in the upper realms, how the intoxicating bliss and sensory enjoyments similarly prevent the development of our potential, partially because of the lack of motivation. It's all because of the lack of motivation, but that has two tracks. One track is just the not seeing and not experiencing of suffering, which is what motivates a person, which is people seek solutions to suffering when they experience suffering and when they can observe even greater suffering in those around them. And that is absent from the upper realm. And then in addition to that, not only is there that lack of overt physical or mental distress, but there's an abundance of distracting sensory enjoyments. So there's just no desire on the part of those beings to engage in any kind of disciplined, sustained practice. So, was there any lingering questions about that section before we move on? Nope. All right. So we may finish the freedoms today. but we shall see. So we'll go on to day 70. Day 70 talks about the freedom of, he says the next 4 freedoms are about being free from the 4 types of human existence that prevent us from developing our full potential. So what we've covered previously were non-human realms that prevented us from tapping into our potential, but there are even human rebirths that are similarly obstacles, which is why we've said that a perfect human rebirth is a subset of human rebirth. It doesn't, being human is a necessary but insufficient condition to really tap into our potential. So the first of these is on day 70 is talking about having been born at a time in which a wheel turning Buddha like Shakyamuni Buddha has not appeared in the world at all. So this would apply even to this planet, say 2,800 years ago and before, because they do talk about other Buddhas prior to that the Buddha was the 4th Buddha of this era, but all of the other teachings. I mean, it's hard to say. Language is an important. Written language is an important aspect of what allows teachings to be more widely transmitted. So it's hard to say exactly what influence other Buddhas might have had, probably much more localized. But still, in general, we could say any place where at that time that human was born, and of course in Buddhism, in Buddhist cosmology, they very clearly establish that the earth is not the only place where beings that we would call humans exist. I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know if they mean that there are other, galaxies within our, or solar systems or galaxies or what have you, other planets that are within our specific universe where there are beings who would be classified as human. And it's even hard to know exactly what classifies as human. I think broadly, we would say that it's a range of karmic experiences. So if we look at animals, hungry ghosts, hell beings, spirit, all of the other types of ordinary existence within the desire realm, we can see that the range of possible experiences is uniquely distinct from the human. There's really no overlap between what is possible for, the only maybe sort of overlap could be like between the animal realm and a person whose body is like really profoundly damaged, and they're kind of just sort of, they're alive and there's some conscious activity. That kind of, that might to some degree approximate the kind of dullness, and it maybe is even a little bit worse. It could, but than an animal realm rebirth. So, but generally speaking, each of the realms has its own sort of unique range of what's possible to be experienced. So a being could certainly look very different, could have a very different biological makeup, but if they had, roughly the same level of intelligence, roughly the same kind of physical makeup where, they would, their pleasure and pain is roughly in line with what ours is, then we would say that that's also a place where there are humans. And it's certainly the case that in many of these places, the karmic causes and conditions on the part of the humans on that planet have not come together such that a wheel turning Buddha can manifest. That, the Buddhas want to manifest um, in every single place where any sentient being exists, but being capable of doing that really depends in large part on whether the beings of that place have any capacity karmically to receive that benefit, and to to be receptive to that kind of connection to an enlightened mind, enlightened activity. So in that kind of place, of course, the teachings that liberate a person from suffering have not been revealed. They are not being practiced. They are in no way part of the culture. There are no methods that are known to the beings. There could be people that are, training in various ways. People that um, due to past lives had some karmic imprints. Meditation could certainly be something that exists. So there could be spiritual practitioners. There could be, but the specific, because there is no wheel turning Buddha that has appeared in the world, then we can't say that the actual specific methods that liberate a person have been revealed in that place. If someone who was training and so on due to past, if they achieved enlightenment, then they would be the person who reveals in that world system, and that has not yet happened in many, many places. Um, but of course, we ourselves are free from that right now. The teachings were revealed and they continue to be practiced. It continues to be a living tradition that's relatively widely understood. There are still great masters that are present in the world that can help us to internalize that wisdom and can guide us in terms of how to best go about internalizing that wisdom. So, for us, that does not characterize our present experience, and therefore that is a negative experience that we presently are free from. But Buddhism would hold that we could, if for example we don't um, have a good, if we don't really practice, if we don't have a good karmic relationship with the teachings, if we discard them, if we disrespect them, then we aren't creating the karmic causes in our next life to again be born on a planet where there are those teachings. We are creating the causes and conditions to be born on a planet. Even if we're fortunate enough to get a human rebirth, those are the karmic causes and conditions that would ripen as that other kind of human rebirth where the teachings are not revealed, they've not been practiced, they're not being practiced. Any thoughts on that one? Okay. So in the next couple, there are some words, some English translations that are come across as kind of anachronistic or odd, to us, because day 71 they talk about um, having been born as a barbarian, um, and so again, that's an English word that's being used to translate a Tibetan phrase. And what it means is a person who's born, even if a person is born at a time and place where the teachings have been revealed, like in a world where there was a wheel turning Buddha and the teachings have been revealed, even even so, there are places within that world where it could be that the teachings have not yet spread, which could be like shortly after, particularly, of course, for us, it's hard to imagine, not having the internet, not having, access to information. But of course, there are many I'm, certainly within Buddhist cosmology, they would accept that of the many worlds where there are humans, a great many are pre-industrial and so on. So just like they were when in our history, the Buddha did reveal the teachings. And so immediately thereafter, and even of course, even when there was the wheel turning Buddha present in the world, if you didn't live literally within a couple miles of where he was teaching, you wouldn't know, at that time. And then for hundreds of years, you still had to live in all of the right places. Um, so and even today, we can certainly say that there are countries in the world where the teachings would be actively repressed by the political powers of that regime, or where the level of systemic poverty, is so high that it's very difficult to access the teachings. So they call that like being born not in a central land. So a central land is a place where the teachings that have been revealed have actually spread and kind of taken root. A borderland or a non-central, those are places where the teachings might spread to, could spread to, but have not, either because they're just actively opposed by the people in power, or, again, for whatever reason, there's no practice in that particular place. And that's what so a person who is in that place is, they decided to call that person a barbarian, which is kind of intense. But I guess, because they're thinking, I don't know, you could conjecture that maybe they're thinking that it is the teachings that really subdue the mind and cultivate the mind, and maybe they're kind of discounting maybe other methods that can sort of play that role. Maybe not, I mean, of course, we have to acknowledge that there are very specific insights that liberate a person from all suffering, and those, might be unique to Buddhism. But of course, there are there are lesser, methods that are still quite effective in other things that are quite useful, and maybe those are somewhat being discounted. But it, sort of depends when you place all of your emphasis, which maybe rightly so, if you place all of your emphasis on just the liberating aspect, then, maybe that justifies being a little bit harsh here. And it could be that a Tibetan speaker, which I am not, might not think that the word barbarian is a good English translation either. I don't know. But that's really all that it means, is that a person really has no opportunity to engage with the material because of the place that they live, not adopting any kind of Buddhist practice. Any thoughts or questions on that one?
Venerable, I'm wondering what the relationship is, or the definition is, between the, as you said, the planets possibly in our galaxy that and the four continents of the mandala.
Yeah, I haven't really studied Buddhist cosmology hardly at all, to be honest. So they do, they talk, we're in, John Budvipa, the southern continent, um, and which applies to the entire world. At least, I mean, I don't know if that they meant that in terms of the entire Buddhist world at the time, that that could be what they meant. I'm not sure. Um, but they talk about the sky, because again, we're talking 2,500 years ago, so there's knowledge about the world itself geographically that they just didn't have. They talk about the sky being the color that it is because it's reflecting off of lapis lazuli, which of course we would say no, it's the diffraction of the sun through the but um, and His Holiness has said that there are aspects of Buddhist cosmology that we have disproven. For example, there was an understanding in the cosmological texts that the hell realm had a physical location like below the actual Earth's surface. And His Holiness says that that's not true, that was metaphorical, or that reflected um, a lack of scientific understanding at the time. And His Holiness says anything that we find in the teachings that contradicts established, proven scientific fact ought to be rejected. And so he has said that we should no longer hold the view about the hell realms, in particular. And of course, I think he would say about, why the color of the sky is sky colored. Um, so, um, but yeah, they don't. I just don't know. I don't know if I think Buddhism could kind of go in either direction. It could say that there are multiple universes. I think we could accept that as an idea, or it could just be that our universe is so incredibly, because we don't even scientifically know if the universe is truly infinite or not. People debate about that. So there's certainly a possibility that there's enough worlds, habitable worlds in our universe, that it could account for what Buddhism asserts. I just don't know. Any other questions?
Venerable?
Yep.
Hi. Say more about, I missed a little bit about what you were saying about the hell realms. How it's different. I missed that.
I'm not sure what I said. What did I say? What was I saying?
Talking about the cosmology, the Buddhist cosmology.
Oh, right.
The sky is, we know science now, but then you mentioned the hell realms.
Yeah, so
I want to know a little bit more about.
yeah, so there's descriptions in the cosmological texts where they say that you can, like, it would be theoretically that, like, there's a specific unit of measurement that they actually give. I don't remember what it is, because I don't know if it's in cubits or like what they used back, but there's they give like like an actual really detailed description, like if you drill down through the earth a certain number of whatever it is, 40,000 cubits or something, then you will arrive in the hell realms. Like you will actually physically travel there, and that it's like a place that you can, if you could, you would just now be visiting the hell realms in a vehicle of some sort. And we know that, now we know that the earth is comprised of the mantle and all of the things. And so His Holiness says that actually very detailed description that is there just cannot be true. And so we ought not to think of it as literally true. that the hell realms are more of like an energetic kind of place that can't be traveled to. I mean, at least that's one way of understanding them. That, yeah, that, yeah, I don't know, but he's saying that at least that particular way of presenting their location, we have verified is false. So we can't take that as true because it contradicts proven science.
Okay, thank you.
But of course, the materialists would say that we quote unquote know that the mind is, just the workings of the brain, and His Holiness would say that that is certainly not established scientific fact. That is a philosophical view, that we know that the mind and the brain are related, but no one can prove that a change in the mind isn't resulting in a change in the brain rather than a change in the brain resulting in a different mental state. Um, that is not, if at some point, we can prove, and of course that also there's some evidence, historical evidence over thousands of years related to people having memories of past lives that have, to some degree been just, validated by checking records and checking the way things looked based, and then their descriptions of it matching historical records, and so there's some degree of evidence for that, and that wouldn't be possible if the mind was simply the process of the brain and therefore completely ceased at the moment of death. So we have to also distinguish what constitutes, a scientific philosophical view versus, because really that idea of that reductionist view is kind of, well, this is what we can study, this is how we can fabricate questions, provable research questions, and there's no way to fabricate those same sorts of hypotheses, testable, provable hypotheses, um, if we don't take that reductionist view, which is the materialist kind of position. So, but things that like gravity, and I mean, there are things that are indisputable, and those things, if they were to contradict a Buddhist view, His Holiness has said we must reject whatever the Buddhist view is, because certainly there could be things that, because there's so many texts and there's so much history, there certainly could be things that reflect a cultural perspective, or a particular scientific perspective that just doesn't hold up over time. Okay. So then the next one relates to, here in the teachings, what they call complete faculties, having complete faculties. And this refers to basically having a body and mind that allow us to comprehend the teachings. He says that the Tibetan, which is written as O-N and P-A, Onpa, I don't know exactly how, but Onpa sort of. He says that in English we might translate that as the word deaf. But he says really, it's not just talking about people who are blind or deaf, because that's kind of one way of thinking about it. But really what it means is having a complete inability to comprehend the teachings. And he points out that like many of these, even if we presently have the capacity to comprehend, we may lose that through a car accident, through illness, um, through some sort of injury or what have you. We might enter a comatose state, or we might have some neurodegenerative disorder that completely shuts down the ability of the mind to be expressed through the body in that way. So there's no guarantee that having that condition, like many of these, there's no guarantee that that will persist throughout an entire lifetime. But there are some cases where a person is alive, but it's just sort of a motor function sort of existence. There's nothing really else beyond that. And so they might live at a time and place where there are teachings and they're widely practiced and so on, but they can't interact with the teachings because of that. Okay. And the next one has another one of these difficult English words. So in the day 73, heretics have no opportunity to practice virtue and abandon non-virtue. And then in the first line of the description, it says the last freedom is the freedom to practice Dharma through not having been born a heretic. So here there's two words that are interesting to me. The first is heretic, which again is not a great English word to use. And then also the idea of being born a heretic, which I think is an interesting way of phrasing it. So heretic just means holding strongly to internalized philosophical views that preclude any investigation of Buddhist philosophical views. So it doesn't mean having questions, as we look at Buddhist philosophical views, having questions about them, having doubts about them, needing more information, feeling, not being sure if a particular teaching is something that we are presently capable or interested in adopting or taking on board at the moment. It means holding so strongly to an opposing philosophical view that we have just no interest in looking at or being willing to think about anything having to do with the Buddhist philosophical views. Why you want to call that person a heretic? I mean, that's pretty intense again, yeah. And so, and of course, I think it's also true that then it follows that you really can't literally be born as a heretic or as someone holding to those, because we're talking about internalized philosophical views, and an infant has no internalized philosophical views. So there's two ways but you could say that there are two ways in which something like that is at play. One is that it's true that we are born with karmic tendencies. We are born with certain karmic predispositions. So a person who intensely, fervently practices these these sort of opposing systems in a past life and then takes another human rebirth, they might have a predisposition, a karmic predisposition to once again pick up that same sort of reasoning, that same, just like a sincere, dedicated, fervent Buddhist practitioner is creating karmic predispositions to once again pick up the Buddhist path in a future life. We would have to say that the same is true of other philosophical systems. So that's, but those predispositions, they're not set in stone, either way. They're not set in stone when we want them to be, and they're not set in stone when we don't want them to be. We might like to think that we found, the right path, and for us, and so it'll be, just automatic, that, and that's, can't really say that that's true. We're certainly creating causes and conditions to pick things back up, and to find that, what we agree with, and what seems easy and right and so on for us. But we can't say that it's completely predestined, that there will be no obstacles to that. And so in a way, perhaps that karmic process would also play out in terms of the views of the members of our family, the predominant view in our society, our local society, our larger society. So, but of course, we're also born with reason and analytical capacity. So there's nothing set in stone about that. So I don't think we can say literally that, at the moment of your birth, you have this path that's laid out as adopting or rejecting one set of views or the other. More so, it is that if, as an adult, a person is really grasping and clinging to philosophical systems that make it impossible for them to consider karma, to consider the view of emptiness, then those kinds of insights won't dawn in their mind in that lifetime. There might be other beneficial, and again, that's not necessarily to be judgmental about people practicing different philosophical systems. It could well be that for a given person in a given lifetime, being a Catholic or a Muslim or a Hindu, what have you, is the vehicle that's going to help them create, the best kind of causes, because we don't want to, of course, we don't want to try to convince people to give up other philosophical systems. We don't want to mess with that, because we may succeed in creating doubt in their mind. We might succeed in removing a vehicle that they were using to grow in loving kindness, to grow in compassion, to grow in, to do lots of useful things. And we may not succeed in replacing it with the actual, emptiness might still be a bridge too far for that person, karma, all of these other. So we could actually really end up harming a person by removing something that was playing a really useful role, and then they don't actually go far enough to adopt a system that has greater utility, and then they might think, oh, nothing is true, it's all just and so then they could go into a nihilistic perspective, and they could get involved in all kinds of harmful actions. So of course, really important not to use this as a kind of yardstick for what people ought to be or to be doing, but it's just talking about for a person who has decided to achieve enlightenment specifically, then what kinds of future rebirths are going to meet that one specific goal that a person has freely chosen for themselves as the goal that they themselves are pursuing. What are the causes and conditions that are the most well suited to cause that goal to arise for that person? Uh, and so for that person, of course, it isn't sufficient to practice general loving kindness, general compassion. We have to join that with the wisdom, understanding emptiness. We have to join that with a really subtle view of karma that applies, because karma applies even when we're not engaging with other people. We might have a kind of more broad view of good and bad or right or wrong, might just be when we're interacting with other people. We might think, well, yes, punching someone is bad, but we might not have the subtler view that the anger that gives rise to punching people is something to look at too. Um, so the really subtle views of karmic predispositions that you find, those are really important in order to stay on the Buddhist path and really practice it well. So there are interfering kinds of philosophical views that might make it really challenging to pick up the specific insights that fully liberate a person from all suffering, which is, if that's what we've taken as our goal, then we want to be mindful about those other things. And again, like I say, not related to having a critical mind, an analytical mind. It's not talking about blind faith. It's just talking about having absolutely no space in the mind for anything related to Buddhist philosophical views because of adherence to something that conflicts with those views. Any thoughts or questions about those last two? I don't think I paused for questions on the previous one either.
Venerable, I think Thich Nhat Hanh is the one that said we should never try to usurp anyone's religion. And sometimes, as the Catholics were coming into Vietnam to proselytize, he noticed that people would take the ancestry pictures off their altars. And over time, they learned that they really needed that. So they had to integrate it back into the religion. But I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think it's wise.
Yeah, I mean, and His Holiness, he tells a story of, again, kind of that missionary sort of intervention that happened, because it also happened widely in India as well. And there was, I mean, I don't know all of the exact details of the story, but someone who was, Tibetan, Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, and she, I think, was raised, in a missionary, or with an orphan, orphanage run by a missionary or something. And she said, she was dying, and she had been raised, from that, and and so she was like, well, he was asking her, uh, thinking about her future lives and so on as she was dying, and she was saying, well, out of my respect for this, how I was raised and the kindness of my parents and so on, who were Catholic or whatever it was. Then I kind of want to go to heaven. And then she said, but in my next life, I'll be a good Buddhist. And he was like, well, now wait a minute, you're talking about, going to heaven and being this, but then you're also talking about, and so there was a real confusion in her mind about like what to actually do, like what path to go down, because there were these two kind of conflicting things, which is why the Catholics should kind of stick to the Catholic countries, and the Buddha, but then also Buddhists need to stick to, their own path. They need to not be like, oh, well, you're a Catholic and there's no, God doesn't exist, and that's terrible. That's a tragic mistake to make, to try to impose any kind of other system on a person who's practicing what they agree with, who's practicing what vehicle is best for them. Now, we may have had a past, we may have had a period of time where we practiced something, and seriously or casually, and then so that could also be true. So a person might be asking questions, they might be questioning, and so it's okay to answer questions, to be supportive of someone who's reflecting on something that they used to do or they're not sure. But we shouldn't try to actively undermine anyone's views. That would be a really harmful thing to do. We've covered now the section on all of the freedoms. So are there any questions? Anything that would be helpful to think more about the freedoms that we've covered? No. Trying to see, maybe, I don't know if maybe we want to just wait then until to start the next section on the next day. Well, we'll start covering the richnesses then. Okay, so we've covered 8 different situations which we are free from, the 5 other upper realms, and then the not having been born as a heretic, not having been born at a time when the Buddha hasn't come and taught, not being born in a central land. So those are the freedoms, the negative things that we are free from. And now there are richnesses, the beneficial things that we do possess, that do characterize our lives. So he says that we have found such a perfect human rebirth is like a dream, as incredible as a beggar finding a diamond in the garbage. So the five, there's personal richnesses, which are really just the opposite. These are things that we have. So there are environmental things, and then there are personal things. The personal richnesses are being born as a human being born in what's called a central land or religious country, meaning just that the teachings are not suppressed, they're widely available. Being born with a body that works well enough to understand the material, engage with the teachings. Um, and so all of those are um, just opposite of some of the freedoms, the negative things. Then there's one there's the last two are not opposites. They are positive states that um, actually, I mean, may or may not that may or may not apply to a being who checks those other boxes. So you can check the box of being born human, being born in a religious country, being able to understand the teachings. But then the next two of the personal richnesses, the first is being free from having committed any of the five heinous actions or the five actions of immediate retribution in this life. So a person could commit those, and technically, um, from this perspective, they wouldn't possess a perfect human rebirth because of the negative karma of uh, a heinous action being so strong. So, but Lama Zopa does point out that even a, a karma of immediate retribution can be purified. Um, it's different than other karmas because it is so powerful that if it's not purified, it will ripen at the moment of death in that lifetime. Whereas many of the basically any other karma, we can't say for sure when it will ripen. It may ripen at that moment of death, but it may also ripen many, many millions of years in the future. We can't say when the causes and conditions will come together for that particular karmic seed to ripen. But an action of immediate retribution ripens at the death. So, the impetus to purify that is much stronger. So those are the five heinous actions are killing one's biological mother, killing one's biological father, killing an arhat, which is a being who has achieved individual liberation in that lifetime. So someone who exists on earth that that they are a human that you share the earth with, and in that lifetime they have achieved arhatship, but they've not yet passed away from that incarnation. So they've not achieved. Well, they may be a once returner, but anyway, they're a highly realized. They're not a Buddha, but they're a highly realized Buddhist practitioner who's achieved arhatship. So if you kill them, really bad. Don't do that. So killing one's biological mother, killing one's biological father, killing an arhat, drawing blood from a Buddha is what they call the fourth one. And here the distinction is that a fully enlightened being is impossible to kill because their mind is omniscient. They can see all phenomena simultaneously. So no matter what you try to do. Now, maybe we can say that this is not, I don't know if we can say whether this is technically true, because with the weapons that we have now, it used to be true, but now we can blow up like incredibly large tracts of land. And so I guess if you destroyed the whole world, or you destroyed, then maybe they couldn't escape. But previously, the understanding was, because they can track like everything that you're trying to do, they can avoid whatever it is that you might have an interest in doing. They call it drawing blood from a Buddha because Devadatta did try to kill the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha. He tried lots of different things, and the closest that he got was a huge boulder that he rolled down, a mountain, and it created a very large explosion of, shards of rock that were going in all directions. And the Buddha was able to like track all of these tens of thousands of pieces of shrapnel and so on. But there was one tiny piece of shrapnel that still got through, and drew a line in the flesh of the Buddha, and a dot of blood, issued forth. So basically, it means like making a really concerted effort to kill a fully enlightened being. You won't succeed, at least according to the ancient views. I don't know if technologically, again, who knows. But there is that historical example that if you really try to kill a Buddha, the karma of that's incredibly powerful, negatively so. And then creating a schism in the Sangha is the fifth, which means entering into a spiritual community that is harmonious and functional, and intentionally trying to sow division among the spiritual practitioners of that community, such that they don't function anymore in that harmonious way, that you kind of destroy, not necessarily by killing or by destroying property, but just by sowing division and distrust among the members, that they're no longer a functional, harmonious religious organization or community. That's creating a schism in the Sangha, rending a spiritual community apart through your own intentional actions, like telling them that what they're doing is stupid, or all kinds of different things, or just like spreading rumors. Oh, this person said this and this person said that, and then there's all kinds of recriminations and distrust. That the karma of that's really intense. So we want to try. We might possess a perfect human rebirth. We don't want to mess it up by engaging in any of those 5 actions. But like I say, Lama Zopa is clear in other teachings that even if we do, it's still possible, if we have enough time and if we devote enough effort, to purify that before our death. Otherwise, if it isn't purified, then a lower realm rebirth is guaranteed. Doesn't mean that we'll persist in the lower realms forever and ever and ever, because of course Buddhism would assert that we've committed all 5 of these heinous actions at some point in the past, and yet still in this life we have a perfect human rebirth. So it's not a complete, it's just, it prevents, if we do it again in this rebirth, then it's really difficult to set ourselves up for a succession of human lifetimes going forward from this rebirth, wherein we can quickly amass the causes and conditions to achieve full enlightenment. So we don't want to do them because it will interfere in a really intense way with our goal of creating those karmic causes and conditions. Yeah, and then there's one more, but we'll just pick that up. We'll pick that up next time. But any thoughts or questions about the 5 heinous actions? Or heinous is, again, immediate retribution is a little bit less loaded, because it just means that it's certain that the karma ripens at the death in that lifetime. So the karmic result will 100% ripen in that lifetime. And it will be negative. It's not going to go well. Any questions, thoughts? Okay, so then we'll dedicate. So we recollect our virtuous motivation and think that we've created positive energy in the mind by listening and studying and reflecting. And we offer the fruit of that effort, visualizing strongly that it ripens for the benefit of all sentient beings. So just on your own, think of all of the incredibly vast and beneficial ways providing all temporary and all ultimate causes of happiness and freedom from suffering for sentient beings. Visualize that very strongly. All right. So we'll pick up the richnesses on Monday.
Thank you, Dondrub-15. Thank you, everybody.